Hello, this is Laura Brandt with the Yoga Casa, and I am here with Dr. Tiffany Denny.
I like how that gets more elaborate every time you say
I just love it. And we're talking Embody Love today. So I am a yoga teacher, as is Dr. Tiffany Denny, and it is really interesting since I've become a yoga teacher, hearing a lot of the comments that people make about their bodies during class. And as a yoga teacher, I am so glad that I have my facilitator training and some of that background in Embody Love, because it helps me with how do I not only teach in a body positive way, but how do I address it when students say to me, like, I can't do this because I'm too fat, or I can't do this because, and something negative about their bodies. And in fact, we were just having this conversation about crow pose because I've been working on that in some of my classes. And one of my students was like, I think that ultimately I can't do this because I'm too heavy. And so I kind of had the discussion with her, not, a full on discussion in the middle of class, but we talked about what she might do differently to achieve the pose, if that's what she wanted. And then we talked about it a little bit later too, with some of the other students who had expressed to me a similar thing, like, well, can you do crow pose if you're really kind of in a larger body? And it was like a discussion. So I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that, Tiffany.
Yes, this is such a good question because it comes up all the time in a lot of poses.
Yeah.
And like the first assumption that I just want to like get out of the way is that that the poses are the goal. And really, like, there's this sort of misconception that we're supposed to like fit our bodies into the shape of the poses, when in reality the poses can come in a gazillion variations based on our own bodies. But with something like crow pose, I think a lot of people believe that if you're in if you have a certain type of body, you probably can't do crow pose. And probably people believe that because they just don't see it. Because yoga marketing is problematic, right? And that we don't actually show a lot of people in a lot of body variations doing these poses. But really, like, crow pose is so many other things. It's so interesting to me because if you think about crow pose, like, there are a lot of people that are in, thin bodies, that are in athletic bodies, that also can't do crow pose. And yet, if we're in a bigger body, the first thing we go to is, oh, I must not be able to do this because I'm too big. My thighs are too big. My belly's too big. My arms are too short, like those sorts of things.
Because that's what society tells us.
Right. It's our body's fault, obviously. And in reality, like, no, it's just it's a hard pose. Like, that's the truth of it. It's a hard pose and it's going to take time. And if it's something that you want to like develop, there are ways to do that. But I think that one thing that you can first of all do is start to find people who look a little more like you and let them be inspiring, because it really isn't about the pose. It's about, but like being able to do crow pose in some form or fashion, it can feel really like empowering and enlivening, and just it's freaking fun sometimes, and then just to have that belief that like our body is incapable of doing it because of its shape is totally unfair to your body and to your psyche. So, I think that the reality is like, that's not true, but how can you start to change the way that you see your body? And to me, it's like one of the ways is start finding imagery that's more representative of you. So like if you're a person who is older, if you're like in your 60s or 70s or 80s and you want to like maybe find some people doing yoga that are in their 60s, 70s or 80s. If you have a certain type of body, like let's find some people that represent your type of body for you to follow and look at and be inspired by, because it's like one of those things where, you can't be what you can't see. We kind of have to be able to like see that something's possible in order to do it. And otherwise we sort of find excuses like, oh, it's just my body's not good enough for this. And really it's like, no, if the pose can't be suited to your body, then like, that's not your fault, right?
Absolutely. And that's so funny because I actually ended the conversation with Jessamine Stanley can do
yeah.
that pose. And if you know Jessamine Stanley, she is a bigger bodied yogi, and she
Mhm.
really has put herself out there and shown like, look, even though I have this body type, I can do all of these things. And that has been very empowering, I think, because I mean, that was exactly what I said to them is like, well, Jessamine Stanley can do it and she's in a bigger body. So we know that it's possible. And that's why I think it's so important that we have that representation out there, to just, you know, so people can see like, oh, and Jessamine Stanley, one of the things that she says is when I first started posting pictures of myself doing yoga, people were like astonished. They were like, oh, I didn't know you could do yoga if you were, you know, in a bigger body, or I didn't know you could do yoga if you were African American. She said even people would say to
Yeah.
her, which is so funny because it's like, of course you can, of course you can. But
Yeah.
when you don't see it, when you don't see yourself represented in that way, then it just doesn't, you're just like, oh, well, that just must not be for me. So
Yeah, which is too bad because what you're really doing is like segueing into a much larger conversation about representation in general and like actual discrimination and like things in yoga in the context of how yoga is represented. But we'll put in the comment section a few different people that you can follow that represent different types of yogis, because the more that we can start to see variety and the more that like things open up and possibilities open up. And I think that the deeper yoga practice gets, because it's not all about like, oh, if I can't do that pose, then I can't do yoga. And it's like that whole conversation about it. One of the questions we ask people a lot of times, like surprise and Embody Love Movement, if it's in a yoga group, is like, you know, we'll say like, oh, I have a yoga body. And we'll ask people like, you feel like you have a yoga body? And you would be astonished at how few people believe they have a yoga body, when the reality is that if you have a body and you are doing yoga, then you have a yoga body. So maybe that can be the mantra to say over and over again.
I have a yoga body.
I have a yoga body. I have a body and I'm doing yoga. Good job.
I have a yoga body. Exactly. Well, thank you for that, Tiffany. We have facilitator training coming up on April 27th and 28th, where we will talk more about these kinds of conversations. Yoga is an integral part of embodied love, and that's part of the reason that I love it. And so if you are a yoga instructor or hoping to become a yoga instructor, it's just a good fit. So ask us more questions about that. Sign up at theyogacasa.com and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thanks, Laura. Bye.
Bye.